Russian poet Alexander Pushkin wrote in his poem The Egyptian Nights, "Who will start the passionate tender? My love is now for sale. Tell, who of you could buy this night at a price of his own life?" And there were madmen ready to offer a life for the sake of a night, with a woman who possessed Eleanor's beauty, Sappho's passion, and Aspasia's intellect. She was the Egyptian queen, Cleopatra. Cleopatra was the daughter of the Egyptian king Ptolemy the XIIth. She was born in the year 66 BC in Alexandria, the largest cultural center of classical antiquity. After the death of her father, when she was 16 years old, Cleopatra, following the Egyptian tradition, married her 13-year-old brother Ptolemy the XIIIth and began to rule Egypt. Within 3 years, her husband and brother, under the influence of his instructor, the eunuch Pothinus, tried to overthrow the queen. Cleopatra had to escape to Syria, but she never lost hope to one day return to her local rule and wealth. Despite common legend, Cleopatra was not a beauty. Her look was spoilt with a big nose and a narrow chin. But as the Roman historian Dion wrote, listening to her was a great pleasure. She could charm any man with her voice and manners, even the passionless, as well as the elderly. Cleopatra spoke 8 languages fluently. She was an admirer of literature and philosophy. She played musical instruments and possessed all the ambitions and aspirations of her ancestors for power. In the year 47 BC, the Roman envoy Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt for a tribute. To get Caesar on her side, Cleopatra needed to secretly enter the Alexandrian palace. She rolled herself up into a carpet, and then her loyal slave, who safely entered Caesar's apartments, laid the precious burden at his feet. The 60-year-old commander was fascinated. Due to her cunning and female charms, Cleopatra won Caesar's powerful friendship. He pacified her enemies and gave Egypt back to its queen. Cleopatra and Caesar traveled the Nile together for 2 months, enjoying each other's company. Before state affairs called the commander to Rome, Cleopatra had a son from Caesar, called Caesarion. With the 1-year-old child, the queen arrived in Rome. Despite being an elderly man, Caesar was madly in love with Cleopatra and felt like a young boy. He ignored his legal wife. In honor of Cleopatra, he placed a statue in the temple of Venus, the goddess of love. He was going to declare Caesarion his successor. However, all this resulted in catastrophe. In the year 44 BC, Caesar fell victim to a murderous plot. Heartbroken, Cleopatra returned to home in Egypt. After Caesar's death, his nephew Octavian August and commanders Lipid and Antony shared the rule of Rome. In the year 41 BC, Mark Antony arrived in Alexandria to pacify the enemies of the Roman Empire. To visit the messenger Mark Antony, Cleopatra put on a magnificent costume of the goddess of love, Aphrodite. She intentionally behaved roughly and vulgarly, indulging Antony's tastes. The commander was captivated. Their love lasted for several months, and even after he had parted with Cleopatra and married the sister of August, Antony could not forget the siren of the Nile. 4 years later, he called Cleopatra to Antioch and married her. Cleopatra was the master of manipulation, and from Antony received everything that she wished. Her son, born from Caesar, was recognized as the heir. Her 3 children from Antony received the territories that he had invaded and won. The queen's political competitor, her sister Arsinoe, was killed. The profile of Cleopatra was minted on coins, and her name carved on the boards of legionaries. The power of Egypt strengthened on the queen's bridal bed. But in the year 31 BC, Octavian, the brother of Antony's legal wife, declared war on Cleopatra. But since Cleopatra was not a military commander, the Egyptian fleet headed by the queen receded in the deciding battle at Cape Asatos in Greece. Antony also abandoned the battlefield, and the Romans gained a total victory. To avoid a shameful captivity, Cleopatra began to prepare for death. She started to build her own tomb and tested various poisons on her slaves, aspiring to find the quickest method. For Cleopatra, it was not possible to rescue Egypt with her female charms for the third time. Octavian was not interested in the queen romantically. In honor of his victory over Egypt, he intended leading Cleopatra behind his triumphant chariot, chained as a slave. A basket of figs was delivered to the palace upon Cleopatra's order, and in it a small snake, an asp, was hidden. Its bites rescued Cleopatra from shame, granting her the painless death similar to sleep. Octavian ordered that Cleopatra be buried in Egypt, and completed her tomb at his own costs. Egypt became the Roman province, and the son of Cleopatra, Caesarion, was strangled upon Octavian's order. Cleopatra, a strong woman, strived to hold on to the throne her entire life, but lost it, they say, because she was too much of a woman.